I'm joined once again by Navy veteran and single company founder, Patrick Reveron. Patrick, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jason.
I think a lot of people are pleased to see you today, Patrick, because obviously everybody is concerned about what seems like one of the largest military activities the United States has become involved in recently, and that's always a cause for concern. You, of course, Patrick, were stationed aboard the USS Carl Vinson, one of the most sophisticated war machines ever conceived by man, is a nuclear aircraft carrier, nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. So obviously you're not in the Navy anymore. You are retired. You're the founder of the Single Company. People can follow you on singletm.substack.com and subscribe to you there. We're going to have a sponsor-exclusive conversation on there right after this. But I think a lot of people want to hear about your insights, what we can expect. Obviously, you don't have any operational knowledge of what's going on right now, but as someone with experience of being on these types of, ships, and what can you tell us about what's going on in Iran?
Yeah, I mean, it's very unprecedented. When I voted for Donald Trump in 2024, I voted under the premise that there would not be any new wars, no new conflicts. Venezuela, that's a little bit different. That was a rendition of somebody who was indicted, a foreign leader who was indicted by our DOJ. But the action in Iran, it does make me nervous. Um, it makes me very nervous for a few reasons. One, because of economics. When you have a democratic superpower, really the world's largest democracy like India, that gets about 45% of their crude oil from the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran controls, and 40% of their oil from Iran. Um, that's that's a big deal. And then when you have a totalitarian nuclear superpower like China, that gets 24% of their crude oil from Iran through the Strait of Hormuz, that's another big problem. Um, I try to really look at it through an economic lens, because after I separated from the Navy, Jason, um, unbeknownst to me while I was active duty or reserves, I never really looked at anything through the economic lens, trade routes, the military industrial complex, oil, um, just through this market lens. And I think that this has a very fragile trickle down effect on the world economy, specifically in the West. Um, Iran, they struck all of the oil-rich GCC countries. And for those of you who don't know what the GCC is an informal collective or treaty. It's not a formal treaty, but it's a defense collective consisting of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, the United States, the United Arab Emirates, um, and all of these countries are oil rich. Um, and that is their main export. You take a country like Saudi Arabia, where their main export, their entire economy is predicated on oil. That is how the House of Saud became trillionaires. So when you start messing with the flow of oil, which is the world's number one commodity, um, I think that has some very negative effects, and it's going to piss a lot of people off very quickly, particularly the countries that are immediately affected, such as China, India, and then you can also throw Russia in there. Russia has historically allied and backed up Iran. Um, China has been trying to reopen the Silk Road through Iran, and Iran has been their gateway to Turkey and subsequently Europe, that they've been trying to build for the last 15 years. Um, I really hope and pray that cooler heads prevail and that this conflict, calms down in the next few months because of based off everything that I've seen with what's going on. I know the news is really not telling us much. The administration isn't really telling us much, but we are about to cross the Rubicon into World War III, and that is my biggest fear.
It's well said. I mean, again, I share those concerns. Obviously, you know, don't want to see any of that stuff happen. I think, there's a lot of people who have knee jerk reactions where because Trump did this, they just hate it right away. And I mean, everything you've just stated is completely valid. I share your concerns about, is this going to become another one of these, Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, some sort of protracted military involvement that costs thousands of lives and millions of dollars and is just net a total disaster by the time all is said and done. I mean, it certainly would be a massive change to the way things have been for the past several decades if Trump is able to navigate this and come out of it somehow on top. And I mean, what you're saying about the economic implications also very on point. I mean, gold, I think, is up and the stock market is down. So that's got bad implications for the dollar. And obviously, anytime this sort of stuff happens, there's a lot of uncertainty. Patrick, what do you think about some pundits who've been saying that Trump is doing this to kind of keep China at bay and to gain negotiating leverage over China?
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and that's the optimist in me that is saying, okay, this is the long-term strategic gain because you have, this export superpower that the world has never seen, like China. And, they're about to reach economic parity with the United States. They have an armed force that we don't even know how many there are, at least 20 million in their armed forces. They have an intelligence arm that has infiltrated Wall Street and Silicon Valley, more specifically, committing corporate espionage for the last 20 years since they joined the World Trade Organization. Um, so it's a very uncertain and scary time. I mean, I can only speculate just like anybody else and go off the information that's being given to us by the administration and by the Pentagon and right down the street, right across the water, CENTCOM. Um, so I and look, don't get me wrong. I mean, like China is the number one threat to American sovereignty. Um, we've been a unipolar world for a very long time since the Berlin Wall fell, and I know we've talked about it, Jason, on previous shows. The satellite scandal with Bill Clinton. Giving all this National Reconnaissance Office technology and secrets to the Chinese Communist Party, which now they've capitalized on and perfected. I mean, they're making leaps and bounds in AI, um, and the precedent that it sets, especially with the strike on Ayatollah Khamenei and his entire family. A lot of a lot of people are saying one extreme or the other, and I think that the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Um, I think it was. I think it was Andrew Bustamante, the CIA guy with the crazy hair, he said, I think it was him, but he said something to the effect of, "Oh, well, you just killed the Pope of an entire religion." And I'm like, okay, well, that's not true. The Ayatollah only represents the Shia faction, which Shias are a vast minority in the Muslim world. He represents the Shia faction in Iraq and Iran. That's it. He represents that diaspora only. So he is a pope for a very small sect of Islamists. Let's just put it bluntly, call it what it is. Um, and I don't foresee any really major kinetic retaliation from the regime, especially since it's so weakened. I know they appointed a new Ayatollah. Um, and unfortunately, I mean, the only thing that you can do as far as regime change in Iran, I know the administration has said this ad nauseum about, now is the time for the Persian people to stand up and take back your country, take back your land. But at the same time, that is going to require some on the ground kinetic action, either by the United States and her allies or by Israel or the GCC. And Iran has done something very, in my mind, smart by striking the GCC countries because now, when you strike a city like Dubai or they go into Doha or strike Kuwait. All of these huge hubs of tourism, which these GCC countries, other than Saudi Arabia, have built their entire economy on. Um, well, all these Westerners, all these Brits, Americans, Australians, Europeans, um, Asians, none of them are going to want to live there because the entire appeal for living in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha or even Manama, Bahrain, where I spent a couple of weeks when I was active duty. Um, None of these people are going to want to spend their tourism dollars there. None of these people are going to want, their $15,000 a month high-rise condominiums in this crime-free, desert oasis, such as these places. So, I think Iran is definitely using, an arm of intelligence such as like the MSS, which is China, using FSB, Russia, in order to collect intelligence on all these different GCC assets because it weakens uh, the the retaliatory power and it limits the options of what the U.S. can do to retaliate. Um, so, like I said, I can only speculate, but it is very scary because it is so uncertain. Because all we can do is speculate.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other thing that I have no real kind of frame to I don't really know what the United States military is capable of compared to Iran or whatever it is, but it just seems like don't we have technology and weapons like obviously we don't want to underestimate anybody, but it seems like the United States is devastating them. No? How do we know?
Yeah, I mean, I look, I can say it firsthand. You know, we have we have technology and we have industries that are working on technology through, projects like DARPA, such as our friend of the show, Palmer Luckey and his company Anduril, that um, are leaps and bounds what a regime like Iran can come up with. Iran rents most of its military equipment, like Jericho missiles or any of these high-powered air defense systems. If they didn't build them themselves, they rented it from Russia or China. Um, and I don't think that the Chinese or Russian regimes are printing the directions or standard operating procedures in Farsi for these, IRGC members to use. So, but yeah, I mean, the U.S. We have air superiority, unless it was under Biden, where we let a Chinese spy balloon go 5,000 miles across the country and not shot down until it got off the coast of South Carolina. Um, but we rely on these strategic bases such as Bahrain, and Manama. We have so many military capabilities that the world can't even fathom. And our aircraft carriers, those kind of speak for ourselves, for themselves. Um, the United States nuclear aircraft carrier, it is the most advanced ship in the world. When I was on it, I was very impressed. And then after 2 years, I was like, okay, this thing kind of sucks. But the amount of
What do you mean?
weaponry and the amount of money and the capabilities of a vessel like a nuclear aircraft carrier are something that nobody else in the world has. China, Russia, the Kuznetsov class of aircraft carriers, they might have nuclear power, they might be able to launch aircraft, but uh, there is so much more because the aircraft carrier is an entire floating city of weapon systems. People always call it a floating city because so many people, but there are so many diverse capabilities on that vessel that can prosecute a war in hundreds of different ways. Um, and they're pretty much unsinkable from what I learned. I mean, I was a damage controlman for a couple of years, so one of my main jobs in the Navy was understanding how to fight the ship. So, God forbid, a missile strike or a torpedo or even a nuke or a collision or any of these number of things, an aircraft crashing into the flight deck. I had to understand how to keep that ship floating, how to keep it, going for another 2,000 miles so we could pull into a friendly port. Um, the nuclear aircraft carrier, I mean, it is the most advanced weapon in any military. Um, and we also have submarines. We have our Seawolf, Ohio classes, and you know, uh, what my concern is, a country like China that has not been in a war for decades and decades, and they have been getting Western secrets, been stealing Western trade, been basically copying everybody else and understanding how to perfect everything else so that they could use it. Um, we don't know what China has, um, but my fear is that they know our capabilities way more than what we know their capabilities of, especially when it comes to intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, which people have probably heard a lot lately, nuclear warheads, stealth capabilities, drone swarming, and then also AI, because there is nothing to stop China from, using AI in any of their weapons of war to protect their petro interests. And again, it goes all the way back to economics, Jason, because in 2023, when you had the setup of BRICS, which is an economic coalition of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. South Africa is kind of the redheaded stepchild of that whole coalition, but um, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, those are four huge powerhouses. Russia, number one nuclear superpower in the world. India, the world's largest democracy, 1.5 billion people, nuclear superpower. Uh, you have China, arguably the most effective economy in the world, arguably uh, the most prosperous economy in the world, largest population, manufacturing powerhouse, has 1 million people in their version of their CIA, in the MSS, which has been stealing corporate trade secrets for 20 years. And then you have Brazil, which is on the Western hemisphere. So it's really in our backyard, is in our zone of influence on the world, is in our pull. And my concern with Brazil, which people don't really talk enough about, in my opinion, is Brazil is number two in the world in aircraft manufacturing, whether it's the Embraer or whether it is military aircraft. Um, that is a scary thought, especially with, all of the fighting that we've had with Brazil, especially in the last 2 years, when it comes to their former Prime Minister Jair Bolsonaro, being in prison for 27 years. He's a friend of Trump. Um, I think that allowing them to get into our Western hemisphere was just an abject failure of the Biden administration. Um, and I don't think Brazil is uh, too happy with us going into Venezuela, which has the world's largest oil reserves. Now, I will say this. There was a lot of good strategic planning. And I think on the surface, a lot of people just see, okay, Maduro got indicted, $50 million reward. We go in there and we take him. No, no more conflict with Venezuela. We did a regime change in a week. I think that they knew they were going to strike on Iran. I think Israel, the United States, probably some NATO members knew that we were going to strike on Iran. We knew that the IRGC was going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And that is why we went into Venezuela to capture Maduro, not only to, be in the sphere of influence of a BRICS powerhouse like Brazil, but also take, 100 billion barrels of oil reserves and oil manufacturing as a hedge when the Strait of Hormuz gets closed, which now it has been for 4 days, 5 days. Um, so I think there does seem to be an abstract of a plan. I know that Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth have said, "Oh, well, we don't have a plan," and everybody's been up in arms about that, including myself. Um,
But
but the
Patrick, I mean,
strategic,
isn't that what they want to say? I mean, Sun Tzu style, make everybody think Trump is an idiot who doesn't know what he's doing, when in fact, maybe he's got a better plan than any president we've seen in the past 40 years?
yeah, and that's my hope, and especially with the 4 years of Biden, um, I mean, allowing BRICS to happen. under him and cackling Kamala's power, um, to allow Brazil to let that powerhouse get away is just that is such a long-term abject failure that has such a strong domino effect that the Biden administration allowed to happen. And we could have, or not we, but the Biden administration, they could have prevented the coup that happened in Brasilia in 2022. They could have prevented this democratic collapse and this democratic crisis that Brazil went through. But they didn't. They encouraged it. They stepped back. They didn't do anything. And now you have, for lack of a better comparison, uh, Brazil's version of Trump in prison for the next 27 years, a Supreme Court in Brazil that is all about censorship and globalism. And now they have this economic coalition with all of our long-term enemies as far as economic parity goes. And, when you allow these things to happen, that is not you, trying to be, non-interventionalist. It was almost like it was on purpose, and that can go into the border being wide open and all these other things. But my concern is China. My concern has always been China. Even when I was active duty and I was doing, the ops intel briefs for admirals and captains, is where does China have their submarines? Where does China have their strategic resources? Where are they in the South China, East China Sea? Do they have MSS in Da Nang, Vietnam? When I was there, do they have them in Busan, South Korea? Are they in Okinawa? So China is the boogeyman that nobody is talking about, and I think it is very apropos for the Biden administration, including the Democratic regime in Congress from 2016 onward till 2024. That was talking about Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia's this, Russia's that. Trump's a Russian asset. Tulsi Gabbard is a Putin puppet. Okay, well, I mean, the neocons will always say, "Oh, Russia is just a giant gas station," but Russia is not the boogeyman that the Democratic Party was telling us it was. The real boogeyman is China, and historically, the U.S. has always had this boogeyman in order to justify, prosecuting a war, whether with or without the permission of Congress. And I think China is the real boogeyman that nobody's talking about. But from what I've seen, Jason, I mean, there are a lot of people benefiting from China's, meteoric rise in economics. I think there's a lot of people in the West, especially in Canada. You take a bank like HSBC, which is, I think now the second largest bank in Canada. You have Mark Carney, a bankster who worked for Goldman Sachs and the Bank of London, who is going to China and, allowing China to bring cargo ships there and all this. China is infiltrating our Western hemisphere. And if we want to remain a unipolar world, that had to be shut down 4 years ago.
Well, that's just it. Sorry to interrupt you, Patrick. We're just about out of time here, and we're going to continue this conversation during the sponsor exclusive segment. People should check out substack.com/@single-company. That is Patrick's Substack. And of course, single is spelled with an X. People can go on there and read articles and follow the videos that Patrick has done with me. Subscribe to him on Substack substack.com/@single-company. Of course, subscribers to Crowdsource the Truth will also get the video at crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. You've raised some excellent points, Patrick. We got to talk more about China and their infiltration of industry, the theft of AI technology. You just brought up Canada. China basically routed Nortel to create Huawei, and that's been sort of admitted. We're going to talk about this whole mess with Anthropic and the Department of War, but stay with us, everybody.